We'll get started with a repeat offender, Peter White. We're going to bring back up, and I won't belabor an introduction for him, but he's bringing us a presentation here on moisture sensors and data loggers this afternoon. Welcome, Peter, to the stage.
First of all, a little bit of caveat. When I was originally asked to do this, of course, it was back in the springtime, and we were all busy. And sure, you want me to talk about subsurface drip irrigation? Sure, that's not a problem. Talk about moisture sensors? Yeah, sure, we work with moisture sensors. That works good. And then, of course, come along August, and you start to realize once you get the program out, and you go, oh, you're talking about moisture sensors and data loggers. Well, what do you know about any other systems other than your own? Well, not too damn much, as it turns out. So anyway, so I had to do some, I've been a bit of a student on this too. So I'm going to focus on my system later on, but I'm going to talk about a little bit about some of the systems. As I just made the comment, back in Agriculture Canada, I wish I'd paid attention 15 years ago when we started some of this moisture sensor work a little bit more than I did. So anyway, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the type of moisture sensors and let you take a bit of a look at them and do some of the pros and cons. This is kind of an all over the place business. There are lots of different claims, and and the claims are sometimes quite different than what the reality is. But in the middle of trying to process this, I found an article, of all places, at Wall Street, where they figure the moisture sensor business is going to jump like 25% a year for the next 4 years. It's just going to be huge. And I think somebody else mentioned that this morning, that moisture sensor and all this sensing business and water is really going to be big business for these companies that are involved in making these moisture sensors. First moisture sensor I'm going to talk about is a Neutron Probe. Now, we used to use these in Delhi, and the guys used to have to wear their radioactivity strips on them. And basically what it is, this is a source of high-speed neutrons are released out into the soil around the product, and there's a sensor that measures the speed at which they come back in. And these are really excellent units. They are really highly reproducible, and they'll give very exact measurements on the amount of, first of all, hydrogen in the soil, and hence the amount of moisture content of the soil. They're very, very accurate. Highly repeatable. Unfortunately, you need a government license because there's radioactivity in them, and you can't leave them out in the field. And once you're done the readings, and they're costly, they're like a minimum $5,000. So for certain situations, for people in this room, I can see them being the answer. For a lot of the rest of us, not even close. Now, this is a Stevens Hydraprobe, and now I had to rely on, another caveat is that I had to rely on a lot of people to give me some information on this. Now, Win Innovations, who I'm sure you all know, have several products. You're going to see some of them here this afternoon. This is a Stevens Hydraprobe. Now, it is let me get this right, a coaxial impedance dielectric reflectometer. And it measures soil moisture, salinity, and temperature. It can be left on the ground or relocated and redeployed without worry. It can be installed at any depth. I guess Win uses it primarily at 4 inches, and it can be collected to wireless remote telemetry, so you can get the responses from it anywhere. And they're using it in their corn nitrogen research. Now, I should start off. We're talking about water content here. This is what I want to say that these first few are measuring. They're going to give you a volumetric number for water content. This is the start of the electronic soil water content. So Neutron Probe measures neutrons. The rest of these are some type of an electrical machine. Now, I went over and over and over this, and let's just say they're electronic. This one measures electromagnetic signals in volts. And the Hydraprobe is the only sensor that's commercially available with coaxial impedance. And it has pretty much a really good sensor, apparently. So it's highly accurate, and calibration for different soil types isn't needed. And so the cost would be, for the probe, it's about $850, but is movable. You can move it around and put it in different spots or leave it where you want it. For that $850, you're probably going to need a reader off it somehow or hook it up to some other system to get a reading out of it. Now we have time domain reflectometers. These are different again. They measure the travel time of an electromagnetic pulse. They really should be calibrated ahead of time. If you want actual soil numbers, they need to be calibrated ahead of time to the soil that you're in. They are sensitive to salinity. They're portable, or you can bury them in place. And Rebecca helped me out with some of this too. Rebecca Short's our irrigation engineer in Simcoe. This is a frequency domain reflectometer, which isn't a lot different, but what it does, it measures the repetition time for a fast rise time in the electromagnetic pulse. So they're all basically electronic, as far as I'm concerned, they're electronic moisture sensors of one type or another. These should be calibrated too. In fact, the University of Florida thought that these sensors were pretty good for their farmers, and they did their own calibration for their farmers, so they're already set up to use this type of sensor. When I first got started on subsurface drip irrigation, I felt we needed a way to judge the moisture in the ground because you can't see it. And after talking to Dr. Bonnie Ball, that I used to work with at Ag Canada, she had done a lot of work with neutron probes, and she'd done quite a bit of work with these are a decagon device. And she thought that over the long term, they kind of gave you trends. So that's all I was really looking for at that point in time. I'll talk more about kind of looking for trends again later. These sensors are about $100 a piece, and they can hook into a data logger. You can put 5 in a data logger, and the data logger is $1,000. Now, another very popular type is a capacitance sensors. Generally speaking, these sensors cover depth, and there's several sensors in each one. Here's one from Wind Innovations. They have another one. They sell the SM1. They sell 2 of them, and the SM1's available in a variety of lengths, 30 to 150 centimeters, with a moisture sensor every 10 centimeters. And they can have remote telemetry, so you can hook them up out in the field. And one of the biggest things about these things, I think, is if you go back to the one back there, is they can be kind of complicated to do a real good job of getting them in the soil. It's very important that you get them in the soil tight, because in soil moisture sensors, it's all about, you want to try to find out what the moisture is in undisturbed soil. That's our big thing anyway, and that has been the people that have taught me how to do it. So it can be a bit of work to get these in the soil, and you want to put maybe a solution around them when you're putting them straight down in the soil, and make sure there's no air pockets, and then seal up around them. You want to keep that soil as natural as it possibly can to get a good soil reading. Otherwise, you're not going to get a good soil reading. And they measure the frequency of an oscillating circuits. The output can be variable. It's affected by soil conditions right next to the sensor, as I've said. Wind Innovations has the SM1, which is 3 sensors, and the SM150, which has, I think they're 15? Yeah, 15 sensors. And the 3 sensor one, the 150 one, sells for, for $890. But I think they then charge for the telemetry on top of that. And then their really long one sells for $1,930. I think you pay for the telemetry to get the results on top of that, I think. I should say that most of these companies they'll sell you the moisture sensor, but then they sell you the telemetry, or how you're going to get it, whether it's going to come to your computer or come to your cell phone. And they can do, almost all of them have all of it available. But you're kind of into a yearly fee to make that kind of stuff work. But almost all of them have it. And those that don't have it are going to have it real soon because they're going to get left behind. This is another type that Win sells, a Centec Easy Ag. It's again a capacitance sensor, and they sell them at different, like up to 30 centimeters or up to 50 centimeters. And this is a preliminary look at the kind of results that you're going to get out of the sensors. And they're using their rain gauges with rain gauges to capture irrigation events for some of their potato trials. Now we go from these things that are basically moisture content sensors, which give you the volume of water that's in the ground. Now we're going to talk a little bit. Oh, I forgot. I got two more here. Sorry about that. This is the AquaSpy capacitor. This is one that's become very popular in the U.S. very quickly. Apparently, a lot of farm machinery companies are taking these things on now, and I'll put them out. They've got a sensor every 10 centimeters. And some of the John Deere dealerships and stuff will come out, put them in the ground for you, hook up the telemetry for it, which is just like this, and Bob's your uncle. You got moisture sensors in the field. So they're about, I think the package is about they're about $1,300 for the first season. There might be some cheaper things after that. But that's the AquaSpy tower. Like I said, they're quite popular. Another one that's kind of slick for a quick jab is this Crop X one that has originally come out of Israel. And you just dig yourself a little hole and just to get it started. And then you basically, there's even a coupler you can put on the top of that. You just screw it right into the ground and flip a switch, and Bob's your uncle. It's right to your phone right away with moisture sensor readings. There's two sensors in this, one at 18 inches deep and one at 8 inches deep. And this is pretty neat. You don't need a tower or anything, and they apparently work. They work for everything except the disc, apparently. They've had guys drive over them with their tractor. Tractor, it'll take the disc. No, not so much. So, anyway, it's another type of capacitance sensor. Now we move in. That's the end of the electronic sensors, and now we're into water tension sensors, which are kind of the old standard. The old, I'll show you what was the real old standard on the next slide. But these ones here, you can. Oh, back ahead of myself. Figures are too big. Okay, this is what they call a watermark sensor, and this is actually, even though it measures tension, so we're calling it a tension sensor, but it is an electrical resistance block. So what there's two wires in this little ceramic block that we put in the ground. You put it in the ground at the depth you want. The water migrates into the gypsum, and then you run an electrical current on it, and that actually can translate directly into soil moisture tension. In other words, how much the capillaries are holding the water in the ground to keep them away from the crop. And you can see Rebecca right here. They've got a little reader just right in here that you can just measure it right off by hand. Or, as I said, you can move these around and do them, but they're better if they sit for a while first so they equilibrate with the soil moisture. And these are so cheap. They're like $40 a piece. So you can put a bunch of these in the ground and hook it up to telemetry, and you've got a system. Now, these are the original old tensiometers. Like, they've been around forever. They do a good job, but everybody that I know that's used them just really curses at them because soils dry out. There's a porcelain tip on it, and basically it's, here again, measuring the tension, how hard it is to get the water out of those capillaries, water capillaries. So it will give you a reading on a vacuum of how hard a pull it is to get that water out of the ground. They're touchy to use. You got to keep water in them, and you really, as you can see by these, you have to go out and read the number on the gauge to know what you're getting. And you've got to really watch the area around them because water can run down that tube and throw your results off. There's a few things. I know they're a bit of a pain, but the number where they give you when they're reading good is a really good number. It can there's all kinds of tensiometer charts that you can run off of and tell you whether you need to irrigate or not. This is an electronic tensiometer that Hortu have come up with. And Hortu are a very busy company in the irrigation business. They've been in California for years, but there's a Canadian aspect to this in that a couple people in Quebec helped out with the design of this and the building of this system and are still involved today from what I understand. But it's a electronic tensiometer. This kind of gives you a little bit more background on soil tension. They love soil tension because they say it tells you exactly how hard the plants have to pull the water. If you look and see here, the difference is, here we got a sandy soil. Now, these other electronic tensiometers are going to tell you the water content is 20%. Hortu tells you the soil tension is 5 C-bar, which is, I'm not totally familiar with it, but it means the water is able to come out of the ground and into the plant relatively easy. This other example, clay soil, again, you've got the same water content, so it's going to measure the same on your electronic testers, but the soil tension is 60 C-bar. So as a result, you've got a stressed plant because it's way too hard for the water to get out of the soil. So you don't need to irrigate this situation, but you definitely need to irrigate this situation. So here you have quite a program. They have telemetry that they can get out to. They even go a little bit further, I think, in that they have programs that they line up a little tighter with maybe their climate and that sort of thing. Not all of them line up with climate, but I think Hortu does, and they'll make you recommendations on irrigation recommendations based on that. But they're a little pricier, but they handle everything themselves. You tell them how many sensors you want, where you want the sensors placed, and they do it all for you. And as a result, they're maybe 50% more expensive than the other systems again. But a lot of people that have them really like them. So now I'm gonna, those are basically the main systems that are out there. There are other ones. There's all kinds of sensors all over the place. But so you can spend as much money or as little money as you want on them. The same thing with the data loggers. The data loggers will run from, that you can put in the field that will send stuff to your phone or to your computer or anything. You can pay anywhere there from $800 to probably $2,500 if you want to spend that much money. I'm just going to give you a little background here on our project on SDI and why we went the way we did and how we use it. And like if at any point in time, if there's any questions, please just put up your hand and let me know. As I said, in talking to Dr. Bonnie, we wanted a system that I could let each one of our farmers see at least one location in the field what the moisture was like. Because really on a drip system, you want to try to keep the available soil moisture at between 75 and 80% capacity. Like a normal, like a pivot system, they probably talk 50 or 60%. Well, on a drip system, you've got the system there already. If you're going to put the water on, you want to put it on in small increments, so you want to start early. You don't ever want that plant to be stressed. So to measure that, you need to know the evapotranspiration, because like I say, we can't see these plants, and you're not going to, I defy anybody to tell me when a corn plant is under 80, when is that 80% capacity of available soil moisture. Those corn plants look pretty darn good. So we're looking at the evapotranspiration rate, and then we want to look at the appropriate crop coefficient. I think we talked about with somebody this earlier. Like a plant's smaller, they don't have that big a need. But when they get to tasseling time, they really do have a need. So we want to know how much daily water requirement to put on. So we'll put that water on. But if we have our soil moisture sensors there too, we can watch them and see what they're doing. And then maybe we can tweak the system a little bit to see whether or not our formula is given the right idea. So this is what we were doing with the guys from Netafim this summer with Jeff Lipsick and Todd Bugner. That we looked at our moisture sensors, and weekly we would look at our tissue samples to look at fertigation, and we would look at evapotranspiration, and we would look at the crop stage that we were at to try to determine where we, what we needed to do. So this is an example of what these moisture sensors, these decagon sensors will give you. Now, this is Judge Farms for about 2 months. I'm just going to let you look at this. We're not going to pinpoint on it too much. But this was Judge Farms from, where are we talking, around the 1st of July here. I think he would have been just a little bit under field capacity right here. He probably could have let it drop off a little bit more. Like down here, I imagine that's about 80% of capacity right there. And this is typical of what the 2 months was like. These little marks down here are the rainfall. Okay, now an inch of rainfall would have been up here. So the very most rainfall they got, I think they got about 5/8 of an inch right there. So that was, and that's for 2 months, and that's all the rainfall he got. So anyway, we're watching these moisture sensors. What do these really tell you? We went to Rebecca Short and said, we've got 5 moisture sensors for each one of these data loggers. We want to put them out at the best way that we can make that our farmers can read what's going on in their crop. Rebecca right away said, okay, what you want to do is you want to find a soil emitter in the ground, which if you remember back in those pictures this morning where I showed you where we dug down and you could find an emitter and find the drip tape in the ground, in the field, in the corn crop, what we'd do is find that, and then I would measure down 4 feet down the field, right parallel to it, and I would dig a sidewall hole right down beside the drip tape, and I go down 22 inches. And so I've got undisturbed soil above and below the emitter and undisturbed soil down at the bottom. So then what we would do is we would we put an emitter in 4 inches, or put a sensor in 4 inches above where we knew there was an emitter, but in undisturbed soil. We would just ram the emitter or the sensor into undisturbed soil above and then 4 inches below it. And then we put one in super deep at 36 inches because we never wanted water from that emitter to ever show up at that 36-inch level, right? We don't want to be putting water down there with a drip system. And then we went back, a foot back of that, and put an emitter down beside the tape, but it would be halfway in between the emitters. And then the gray line, we moved out halfway in between the tape runs. So if the tape runs were 44 inches, we would put one at 22 inches. And Rebecca thought that would give us a good system. And you know what? We haven't changed it in 4 years because our guys really like it when they go to look at what they're seeing. So just this is Jeff Lipsick at Harley. You know, I think I mentioned that rainfall event earlier. There it is right there. Jeff was irrigating in through here. See, he was irrigating about every other day at that point, and he was still getting a little bit of a moisture drop. Now in here, he'd started to bring it up a little bit, and there's a couple rainfall events there, but he's starting to irrigate steady. He's every day in through here, and then all of a sudden, he got that 3-inch rain right there. So that's the result of that. Now, if you look, this green line is the subsurface one. That's the 36-inch line. And notice how that's coming down. Now, it does go up for that rain, so he had some leaching. I don't think there's any doubt about that. When we see that line go up, you're probably going to have leaching. You really don't want that line to ever go up. If we go back and look at Todd's back here, what's going on with his low line? This south farm, that subsoil down there at that 36-inch mark, when I pulled my auger out, I could hardly get the soil to come out with it. That is so light and gravelly down there, it just doesn't hold any moisture. But look at how that corn, when you get into, especially early August, look at how the corn's pulling water out of that 36-inch area. It's just, and this is a little problem here too. This is the sensor that's in between the dripper rows. He's got good moisture up where near where the drip tape is, but in between the rows, he's starting to lose moisture there. So he's got some corn, and notice how he kind of noticed that, and he started putting more irrigation on here, and it leveled off here. So he managed to hold it. Sometimes that will keep on going, because that's in between the corn rows. And in Todd's case, that was right under a corn row. Yes, Bruce? 18 inches.
Okay. I was going to suggest it was too shallow and it's not where the corn is, but no, she's got it pinned right. You've got it kind of like dropping depth charges on a submarine with the
Yeah, like typically, we can get carried away talking about this stuff, but that line in gray, stop pressing that one. Sorry, guys. That gray line, every place that we've let it drop down much, Vermeer's Farms had an issue where they let it drop off in August one year. They just kind of cut back on the water a little bit, and when it went down, he had the same thing. He never was able, well, it leveled off, but he could never bring it back up again until they got a rain. We have, the very first year, we had some of that happen, and then I watered a little bit more, and it seems to be, if you water a little harder early, you can maintain that, for whatever you want to call it, horizontal percolation. You can hold it. So if they'd had a little bit more water on before this, like before he took that big dip right there, they might have been able to hold that up there for the season. So, but it's one of those things that we're learning, and thank you. Anyway, so we go on. This is typical of what you could see with Jeff's, and I think you can just see how we use the system. I'll go to this is more typical of what we're looking at week to week. Like we would sit down with the farmers, and you can see Jeff is probably at field capacity here. Once he's getting down, he's at field capacity is about 30.32 or 0.33. We figure we've probably got the soil available moisture probably goes down to about 0.15. I know it's a guess, but we're probably down to about 80% there, so he starts to irrigate. And then he falls down a little bit more. And anyway, it just gives you something to look at. They can look at it every day, and you can look at what the evapotranspiration rate is and go from there. As I said, we'll just quickly go through this, but this is we look at the corn growth stage 2. Corn growth stage ties in directly to what these crop coefficients are right here. As you can see, a crop coefficient is used to multiply the evapotranspiration. So when the corn isn't quite at tasseling, or when it's back at like 12 leaves or something, it's back in here. It's not using as much water as it is down there. So we use a reference chart like this, depending on the growth stage. Then we look at the evapotranspiration rate, which you can get off a lot of different places. And this summer, it was usually around 0.1 to 0.2 inches. So we settle on 0.15 inches probably of water use per day for the corn crop. We just fill that into to our equation here, where the evapotranspiration is 0.15. The tasseling time, the corn constant is 1. So you need to put on 0.15 inches of water per day for that corn crop. Judge Farm supplies about 0.04 inches per hour. So the daily water needs by the hourly rate at Judge Farms, they need to irrigate about 3.75 hours a day on each of their zones, and they have 6 zones, and they can do 2 at a time. So that would kind of tell Todd what we would recommend for an irrigation experiment. So anyway, that's how we did the moisture sensors this year. This is one thing, I can talk about soil moisture sensors as much as I want, but Netafim brought us up just at the end of the season. Netafim in the USA have been working with Smartfield with this optimum plant canopy temperature rig, and they are really impressed with it. They've done 2 years of testing now, and it uses an infrared thermometer to measure the plant canopy temperature, and they've got a 1500 radio frequency range. It reads every minute, averages every 15 minutes. And they're being able to tie this into moisture sensor loss faster than the moisture sensors that they're using. They seem to have a really good tie-in with it. So that might be something in future. You know, goodness says they get their I see even Pioneer Corn has one this year that they're using around in our area. They got about 20,000 acres in, and they take satellite shots weekly at the corn crop and can tell you whether it's under stress or not. So anyway, who knows where we're going with this, but all the more technology, we're going to get overwhelmed with it. If you want to have any more information on soil moisture sensors, please go to Rebecca's stuff. It's on OMAFRA. You won't have a hard time finding it. She's got lots of good moisture sensor stuff in there. And if you want to see some good videos on moisture sensors and how you put them in, go to Kansas City State, Oklahoma State, type in soil moisture sensor demonstration. It was published on May 5th. And there's at least 6 videos in there with all the companies putting their own moisture sensors in the ground. So. Any questions? Sorry, it was a little long.
Any remaining questions for Peter?
I was just curious about the sensors. Like, how many would you need for a farm, like on a per acre basis, like for a large farm? Like,
Okay.
how granular?
Well, we're at Boogner's farm is 80 acres. I have 2 sensors there, but you know what? We normally run off the 1 sensor because I think I've got 1 sensor station in a better spot than I've got the other one, and so I try to pick the spot that's maybe a little bit on the dry side. So it's going to be the worst case scenario, and that's what we've done at the other farm too. And I'm happy with that. When you put them in a little bit heavier spots, sometimes you get some variable readings. But maybe that means that we're putting a little too much water on the other spots too, so there's some of that. But I'd like to go on the average to a little bit dry side. But 80 acres, I think you can get by with one. I feel pretty good about the way the corn looks across the whole field based on the one sensor station.